They looked at me like I was already fading, like I belonged in a corner somewhere, waiting quietly for the end. I smiled when they handed me store bought gifts, nodded when they made decisions without asking, and swallowed the sting every time they spoke to me like I was in the way. Maybe I let them. Maybe I wanted to believe that love was still there, buried under their busyness, their ambition, their carefully measured affection. But then came a night I wasn't supposed to hear. A voice, a plan, a quiet betrayal wrapped in convenience. And just like that, something inside me stopped bending. This isn't a story about revenge. It's about waking up after a lifetime of being too polite. If you've ever felt like the people closest to you forgot who you are, like and subscribe. And tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Would you have stayed silent or done what I did? I'm Harold McKinney. I'm 72 years old, and I've spent most of my life building things, bridges, homes, office buildings, and the house I live in now. It's a modest two-story place in Boise, Idaho, the same one I built with my own hands 34 years ago for my late wife, Margaret, and our son, Logan. Margaret passed away from pancreatic cancer 3 years back, and since then, it's just been me and the silence. I've never minded being alone. The house still smells like her lilacs. Her books still line the shelves. Her favorite teacup sits in the cabinet. I keep things tidy. I keep a schedule. I live quietly. I don't bother anyone. And I never thought my own son would treat me like I was a problem to be solved. It was a Thursday evening. I had just finished reheating some leftover meatloaf and was sitting at the dining room table. The light from the setting sun cast long shadows through the bay window Margaret had begged me to build all those years ago. My knees ached more than usual, but it was nothing new. I'd poured concrete and carried steel beams for most of my working life. Pain was part of the deal. The phone rang as I was scraping the last of the sauce from my plate. Caller ID read Logan. I smiled, foolishly happy to see his name. "Hey, Dad," he said, cheerful. "Just checking in before Amber and I head out. We've got that real estate expo in San Diego, remember?" "Sure," I said. "Sounds like a big trip." "Yeah, we're hoping to connect with a couple of developers out there. Could be a big opportunity." "Well, travel safe," I said. "You know you can always call me if you need anything." "Of course, Dad," he said quickly. "Love you. Love you too, son." I heard a click, and I was about to hang up when I noticed the line hadn't disconnected. What I heard next made my stomach twist into a knot. Logan's voice, muffled but clear enough, speaking to Amber. "He's getting worse, you know. Last time we were there, he forgot we were even coming. He left the stove on after making tea." Amber sighed. "I've been telling you for months. He can't keep living there alone. It's not safe. And honestly, it's not fair to us. That house is sitting on a gold mine of equity. We're trying to build something, Logan. That money is just trapped there with him, and he doesn't even need it." "I know," Logan replied. "It's time. We find a good facility, something clean, something with nurses on site. We frame it as a safety move. He's old. He'll accept it. He always does when we say it's for his good." Amber laughed. "He's so grateful anytime we visit. He'd probably sign anything you put in front of him. He's just holding us back now. He doesn't even realize how much we've had to put on hold." Logan added, "If we can liquidate the house, we'd finally have enough for the Boulder project. That's our future. I don't want to miss our window because we're waiting around for my dad to start forgetting his own name." I couldn't move. I stared straight ahead, the cold meatloaf forgotten. My hand went numb around the fork. I listened to my only son, my flesh and blood, talk about me like I was a used-up appliance. Amber said, "Let's get the paperwork drafted next week. Frame it as a trust or a health directive. Something simple. He won't ask questions. He never does." Logan's voice dropped to a whisper, but I still caught it. "It's time to move the old man out of the way." I slowly placed the phone back on the receiver, my hand trembling. The room around me felt like it had shifted. The air grew heavy. The walls, the very ones I built brick by brick, now felt foreign, almost hostile. I looked over at Margaret's photo on the mantel. Her kind eyes stared back at me. What would she say if she heard that call? Would she tell me to fight or forgive? Would she be angry or heartbroken? Maybe both. I thought about every sacrifice I'd made for Logan. The nights I worked double shifts so he could go to college. The years Margaret and I drove the same battered pickup while helping him with his down payment. The tears in Margaret's eyes the day Logan got married, and the pride in mine when he called me the best man at the reception. I thought about the birthday cards he stopped sending after she died, the holidays he skipped, the bills I helped him pay when Amber lost her job. And now he wanted to warehouse me, take my house, and smile through it all like he was doing me a favor. I sat by the bay window Margaret had begged for when she was pregnant with Logan, back when every dollar was pinched and every overtime shift felt like a step towards something better. The moonlight filtered through the glass and reflected off the picture frames still crowding the mantel. Margaret's smile, frozen in time, kept looking back at me with something between comfort and warning. By morning, I was still in my chair, the half-drunk cup of cold coffee sitting beside me untouched. I walked to the kitchen stiffly, my joints aching from the long sit, and opened the drawer where Margaret used to keep all the bills and documents. Everything was still in its place. I pulled out a manila folder labeled Education Logan in her handwriting. Inside were university invoices, tuition checks, textbook receipts. I flipped through them like a photo album of sacrifices. $47,000 in total, stretched over 4 years. I remembered those long nights at construction sites, coming home coated in concrete dust. Margaret would be waiting at the kitchen table with a pot of tea and a warm towel. "Harold, you need to stop pushing yourself like this," she would whisper while rubbing my shoulders. But I always brushed it off. "He's got a shot, Mark. He's smart. He could be the first McKinney to get a degree. I'll be fine." She never argued. She just kissed my cheek and added another line to the budget sheet. I put the folder aside and reached for the next one labeled Wedding Logan and Amber. Inside were estimates from venues, caterers, suit rentals. We'd offered to help with $5,000, but somehow it turned into $28,000. Amber had wanted a garden wedding with a live band and custom floral arrangements. Logan told me he'd pay me back when the bonuses at work kicked in. The bonuses never came. I remembered how he hugged me that day, tears in his eyes, whispering, "You're the best father anyone could ever have." It was the same hug he gave me 3 months later when he and Amber asked to stay at the house, just for a little while after their condo deal fell through. I told them they could have the guest room. I paid the extra utility bills without complaint. I cooked most nights. When Amber twisted her ankle jogging, I drove her to physical therapy twice a week. When Logan lost his second job, I helped cover their car note. I told myself this was what family did. Margaret would have done the same. She always believed in giving without keeping score. But sitting in a quiet house now, those memories didn't warm me. They stung. I stood and walked upstairs to Logan's old room, still painted a pale blue, still cluttered with old sports trophies and high school posters. The bedspread hadn't been changed in 10 years. I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the small desk I'd built him when he was 13, sanded smooth, painted white, fit perfectly under the window, just like he wanted. I remember the day he asked for it. "Dad, can you build me a desk so I could do homework in my room?" He'd said it with such trust, such faith that I could do anything. And I had. I'd stayed up late in the garage that weekend, measuring twice, cutting once. That desk still stood solid after all these years, a monument to a kind of love that asks for nothing and gives everything. But now Logan wanted me out. He wanted the house, not the man who built it. I opened his old closet and found boxes Margaret had packed after his wedding. One was labeled Logan Baby Keepsakes. Inside were baby shoes, a lock of his hair, old report cards, and a tiny handprint in plaster that still made my throat tighten. Margaret had cried when she packed that box. She had held the little shoes and whispered, "He's not our baby anymore, Harold. He's someone's husband now." But she never imagined he'd become someone who'd calculate her husband's value based on resale square footage. I took the box and carried it downstairs, setting it beside the others I knew I'd soon have to sort. I returned to the living room and pulled out another drawer, this one filled with paperwork about the house. The original blueprints, inspection reports, receipts from the materials I'd bought myself because hiring outside help was too expensive. I had built that house over the course of 2 years while working full-time. I poured the foundation with 3 friends on a chilly spring weekend, hauling wheelbarrows of gravel and concrete because we couldn't afford mixer. Margaret made sandwiches and brought lemonade in a thermos. We framed the walls in early mornings and late evenings. I drove bolts in with hands so sore I couldn't hold a fork at dinner. Every inch of that house held a memory. The crown molding in the living room? Margaret's idea. She saw it in a magazine and said it would make the place feel more complete. I spent 3 nights figuring out the right angle cuts and another 2 installing it. The bay window, that was her dream spot. She wanted to read there in the afternoons with tea and classical music. I built it just the way she imagined. And now Logan and Amber wanted to sell it off like an asset to be unlocked. Just another checkbox on their roadmap to wealth. They weren't just selling my house. They were selling my history. Margaret's memory. Every birthday Logan had. Every Christmas morning. Every dinner with candlelight during blackouts. Those moments lived in these walls. And they wanted to erase it all. I stood at the mantel and looked at Margaret's photo. "You were right," I said aloud. "We gave him too much, and he forgot how to be grateful." The Rachel in question was Rachel Monroe, an estate attorney Margaret, and I had consulted 3 years ago when the chemo had started failing and we needed to put our affairs in order. She had kind eyes and a sharp mind, the kind of person who didn't speak unless it mattered. I found her card tucked neatly in Margaret's old recipe box, right between instructions for rhubarb pie and the cornbread casserole Logan used to beg for on Sundays. I dialed her office number with a steady hand and a voice that didn't shake. Her assistant answered, cheerful and oblivious. I gave my name and explained I needed a follow-up appointment as soon as possible. I said it was urgent. She clicked through her schedule and offered me a 2 p.m. slot that same day. I took it. After hanging up, I opened my closet and pulled out the navy blue blazer Margaret had bought me to wear to Logan's college graduation. I hadn't worn it in years, but it still fit. As I slid the jacket on, I caught a glimpse of myself in the hallway mirror. My face looked older than I remembered, the creases deeper, my eyes a little dull. But underneath it all, I saw something else, something fierce. The lines didn't make me weak. They made me experienced. I wasn't confused. I wasn't fragile. I was preparing for war. I gathered every document I thought might matter. The house deed, tax records, power of attorney forms, utility bills. I even packed the original blueprints for good measure, though I knew Rachel wouldn't need them. As I zipped up the leather folio Margaret had given me on my retirement day, I whispered under my breath, "You always said I might need this one day." The law office was only 15 minutes away in a red brick building near the post office. I arrived 20 minutes early, as always. The receptionist offered me water. I declined. When Rachel finally appeared in the doorway and called my name, I stood slowly but with purpose. Her face brightened when she saw me, then dimmed slightly as she took an attention in my jaw. "Mr. McKinney," she said warmly. "It's been a while." "It has," I replied, "but I've got a situation that can't wait." She led me to her office, and I took a seat across from her desk. Sunlight streamed in through a tall window behind her, casting long lines across the floor. She folded her hands. "What's on your mind?" I laid the folio on the desk and began. I told her everything about Logan's phone call, the betrayal, the talk of nursing homes, and liquidating assets. I didn't dramatize. I didn't need to. The facts spoke loud enough. Rachel listened intently, nodding occasionally, her face unreadable. When I finished, she sat back and let the silence breathe for a moment. Then she leaned forward. Do you still have the original deed? Right here, I said, pulling it from the folio. She examined it carefully. The house is in your name alone, correct? It is. Margaret and I held it jointly, but when she passed, full ownership transferred to me. And you've never added anyone else to the deed? Never. She nodded again. Then legally, no one can touch this property without your explicit consent. They can't sell it. They can't force you to leave. And they certainly can't use it for collateral without your signature. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. So I have options? Plenty, she said. You could sell, gift, lease, or transfer it on your terms. The key is it's all up to you. I paused. What if I wanted to sell it? Quietly, without my son finding out until it's done. Rachel raised an eyebrow. You're sure? I've never been more sure. She tapped her pen thoughtfully. You need a discreet realtor, someone with experience in quick cash sales. I can refer a few. And you'll want to set up a new bank account, preferably one your family doesn't know about. We can get the ball rolling today, if you like. Do it, I said. Every inch of that house carries my blood, sweat, and Margaret's dreams. If they think I'm too old to own it, then they don't deserve it. Not now. Not ever. Rachel opened a drawer and began collecting the necessary forms. I'll draft a temporary living trust to hold the proceeds until you decide your next steps. It'll shield the funds and give you time to plan. Do you have a new address in mind? Not yet, but I'll find one soon. As she filled out the paperwork, she glanced up. This isn't the first time I've seen this, you know. Children who think aging parents are chess pieces in their financial game. But it never gets easier to watch. I'm not going to be one of those pieces, I said. Good, she replied. Then let's make sure they know that. I signed every document she gave me, read every paragraph, asked every question. I didn't want to miss a single detail. When we finished, Rachel handed me a small checklist. Talk to one of the realtors I've circled. They're professionals, discreet. I'll stay on standby for title and contract review. Rachel's words echoed in my head. They can't touch your property. You can sell it whenever you want. It's yours. That truth was a sharp contrast to the betrayal I'd heard through the phone only 2 days before. For so long, I'd carried this belief that my life wasn't entirely mine anymore, like I was just biding time until Logan and Amber made the next move. But now I realized I didn't have to wait. I could make the next move myself. I pulled out the referral list Rachel had given me and read through the names. One in particular stood out, Travis Breen. She had circled his name with a note that read, discreet. No nonsense. Fast. That was exactly what I needed. I dialed his number and waited. He answered on the second ring with a voice that sounded alert and professional. This is Travis. Mr. Breen, my name is Harold McKinney. I was referred to you by Rachel Monroe. I'm looking to sell a house quickly and quietly. Can you help me? There was a pause, then his tone shifted. If Rachel sent you my way, I'd be happy to help. How soon are you thinking? Immediately, and I don't want any public listings. I want cash buyers only. No signs in the yard. No neighbors asking questions. Understood, he said. Can I come by today to take a look at the property and get a feel for the condition? 3 o'clock, I said. I'll be waiting. I spent the next 2 hours preparing the house. Not because it needed to be cleaned, but because I needed something to do with my hands. I wiped down the counters Margaret had chosen, dusted the baseboards, arranged the living room pillows just the way she used to. I even lit one of her old candles, lavender and sage, the kind she always burned on Sundays. When 3 o'clock rolled around, Travis arrived in a dark blue sedan. He was younger than I expected, maybe late 30s, dressed in a clean button-down shirt and slacks. He carried a leather folder and a phone already loaded with market data. I let him in and closed the door behind him. Before we start, I said, I want you to understand something. This house isn't just a building. I built it myself. Every nail, every beam, every tile in the kitchen, I laid it with my own two hands. This was her dream home. My wife and I lived here for over 30 years. She died here. My son was raised here. And now, I need to let it go, not because I want to, but because it's the only way to protect what little dignity I have left. Travis looked me in the eye, nodded once, and said, I understand, Mr. McKinney, and I promise I'll treat this with the respect it deserves. He walked through the house, taking notes on his phone and asking questions about plumbing, roof condition, furnace age. I answered everything clearly. I still had all the paperwork, warranties, service records. Margaret kept impeccable files, and I had continued the habit after she passed. After about 40 minutes, Travis sat down at the kitchen table and opened his folder. Based on current comps in your neighborhood and the excellent condition of your home, I'd recommend listing at $885,000. But if you want speed and cash, I have a buyer who's been looking for something just like this. He's an investor who pays fast, no inspections, no contingencies. He'll probably offer $860,000. You close in 10 business days, cash in hand. I thought about Logan and Amber, about their plans to sell the house behind my back, their conversations about turning my life's work into startup capital. Let's do it, I said. Travis didn't flinch. He took out a simple agreement and walked me through the terms. I signed it, page after page. Initials were required, signature at the bottom. When it was done, I stared at the papers in front of me. My house was almost no longer mine. It felt surreal. Travis looked up. You'll have 30 days to vacate after the sale, or sooner if you choose. The buyer's flexible. I'll be gone in 10, I said. They won't get the chance to walk through that front door again. He raised an eyebrow, but didn't press. Understood. I'll call you tomorrow with confirmation. Expect a visit from the title company soon. And Mr. McKinney, he paused before standing. You're doing the right thing. Some people wait too long to act. I watched him leave, his car pulling away as the sun began to lower on the horizon. I stood in the hallway and ran my hand along the smooth trim I had installed the week before Margaret came home from her final hospital stay. She had smiled so wide when she saw it, said it made the house feel fresh again. I had tried so hard to keep it fresh for her, for Logan, for myself. But what surprised me wasn't the sadness, it was the calm. For the first time in years, I wasn't waiting on anyone to make decisions for me. I wasn't asking Logan if a certain expense made sense. I wasn't watching Amber tilt her head while judging the old carpet or the dated appliances. No, this time I'd made the call, and they wouldn't even know until it was far too late. The next step was to find a place to go. Not just anywhere. I didn't want to end up in one of those sterile facilities they had mentioned over the phone. The ones with pastel walls and two cheerful nurses where people waited out the clock while someone else decided what they could eat and when they could sleep. I wanted my own place. Small, quiet, clean. Somewhere I could wake up and brew my own coffee and read the paper without a schedule or hallway bingo. I pulled out the laptop Logan had bought me 2 Christmases ago and searched for senior apartments near Boise that offered month-to-month leases. It didn't take long before I found a community called Willow Glen, a modest senior complex on the edge of town with well-kept lawns, ground-level units, and good reviews from other retirees. They didn't ask many questions, didn't require long-term commitments, and most importantly, they allowed cash payments. I called the office and spoke with a woman named Bethany who sounded like she had seen every kind of story and wasn't easily surprised. I told her I needed a furnished 1-bedroom as soon as possible. She paused, then said they had one that had just opened up yesterday, after a tenant moved into assisted living. "You can move in tomorrow if you want," she said. "We'll need first month's rent and a deposit." "I'll bring cash," I said. "Just give me the address." I hung up and leaned back in my chair, letting the silence settle over the room. Everything was happening faster than I had imagined. In less than a week, I had gone from heartbroken and blindsided to free and in motion. But freedom has a strange taste when you've spent most of your life thinking you didn't need it. I packed my things methodically, not just to prepare for the move, but to distract my hands from the weight of what I was leaving. I pulled Margaret's jewelry box from our bedroom dresser and placed it gently into my suitcase. Her wedding band still rested inside, untouched since the day I took it off her frail finger and promised her I'd carry on. I packed our photo albums, the ones with Logan's baby pictures, the ones we used to flip through on stormy nights with mugs of cocoa and laughter echoing between the walls. I packed the novel Margaret never finished, still marked with a torn envelope on page 212. I packed my tools, not all of them, just enough to remind me that I still knew how to build things, even if what I needed to rebuild now was my own life. I didn't touch the furniture. The dining table I built in our garage would stay. The couch where Margaret had napped during her chemo treatments would stay. The kitchen island I'd installed by hand would stay. All of it belonged to the house now. I would carry only what mattered, what was real, what couldn't be measured in resale value or square footage. That night, I slept in our bed one final time. I lay on her side, not mine, just to feel a little closer to the woman who would have understood why I had to do what I was doing. I whispered, "You were right, Margaret. We gave too much, but I won't let them take the rest." In the morning, I loaded my truck with 2 suitcases, a toolbox, and a small wooden box where Margaret used to store her handwritten recipes. It wasn't much, but it was enough. Willow Glen was about 15 minutes away, tucked behind a quiet row of trees and lined with trimmed hedges. The apartment manager, Bethany, met me with a clipboard and keys. She didn't ask about my story. She didn't ask why a man in his 70s with sad eyes and a firm handshake was moving in on a Thursday morning with no family in sight. She just handed me the keys and said, "Let us know if you need anything." The unit was small, living room, kitchenette, 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom, but it was clean and sunlit and didn't smell like bleach or boiled cabbage. I set my suitcases down and sat on the edge of the unfamiliar bed. The mattress was firmer than I liked. The sheets smelled of laundry detergent I didn't use, and the clock on a nightstand ticked too loudly. But none of that mattered. It was mine. I took out Margaret's photo and placed it on the small table near the window. Then I placed a jewelry box beside it. This would be home now. Maybe not forever, but long enough to remind me that I still had control over my life. I drove back to the house one more time that evening. I didn't go inside right away. I sat in the truck and watched the lights flicker through the windows, remembering every dinner we'd shared, every Christmas morning, every fight and forgiveness, every quiet night with books and warm tea. Then I walked inside and began the real work. I made a list of what would go into storage and what would be left behind. I called the moving company and scheduled a pickup for the next morning. I left instructions for what to pack, boxes marked keep and others marked donate. I didn't need Logan's permission. I didn't need to explain anything. I owned it all, and I would decide what stayed, what left, and what would never reach his hands. I had 10 days before the new owners took possession of the house, and I intended to use every hour wisely. The movers were younger than I expected, 2 20-somethings in matching shirts who introduced themselves as Chad and Hunter. I showed them which boxes were to go to storage, which would stay behind for donation, and which fragile items they should take extra care with. They didn't ask questions about the furniture I was leaving behind or why half the closets were still full. They just nodded, took direction well, and got to work. I appreciated that. I wasn't in the mood for chatter. Once they pulled away with the final load, I stood in the entryway, The house now hollow and echoing, a shell of the home it had once been. The furniture was gone, the walls bare, but the memories remained so thick in the air I could almost see them. Margaret sitting by the fireplace with a book. Logan running down the stairs in his pajamas on Christmas morning. Me and Margaret dancing in the kitchen after midnight when a song we loved came on the radio. I closed my eyes and let those images settle for a moment before I turned back to the present. It was time to seal the plan. The idea had come to me late one night after I'd signed the contracts and paid the deposit at Willow Glen. If Logan and Amber were going to return to find their plan blown apart, I wanted to be sure I saw their faces when it happened. I didn't just want justice, I wanted proof. I ordered a hidden camera online, one of those tiny devices made to look like a phone charger. It had excellent reviews, motion detection, night vision, and a live feed I could access from my phone. It arrived within 48 hours, delivered discreetly to my new apartment. I spent the next morning learning how to use the app, testing the camera angles, and deciding the best placement. I settled on the outlet near the front entry table, just below the framed photo of Logan's 5th grade graduation that I decided to leave behind for effect. It gave a perfect view of the front door and the exact spot I planned to tape the letter. I tested it several times by walking in and out, ensuring the motion detector triggered correctly and the app streamed smoothly. Satisfied, I unplugged the lamp and plugged in the camera disguised as a charger. I then sat down at the kitchen counter with a fresh sheet of paper and my old Mont Blanc pen, the one Margaret gave me for my 55th birthday, and began writing. The first draft was too angry, filled with words I knew I'd regret, so I tore it up and tried again. The second attempt came out too cold, too distant, like something a lawyer would draft. I needed it to hit them right in the heart. On the third try, I found the right voice. I wrote slowly, with intent, each letter carefully formed. I signed it simply, Dad, then folded it and placed it in an envelope with both their names written in my steadiest handwriting. I stood by the front door and stared at the space where I would leave it. That spot had once held a little wooden table Margaret picked up at a flea market. She painted it white and decorated it with a small vase of sunflowers. I could still smell the polish she used on it. I took a piece of painter's tape and secured the envelope to the wall at eye level, right where it would be impossible to miss. Then I stepped back and checked the view through the app. Perfect. The camera saw everything. Satisfied, I took one final walk through the house. I didn't talk to the walls or cry into the corners. I just walked, steady and sure, through the rooms that once held my life. I ended in the bedroom, where the sun filtered through the blinds in soft, golden lines. The indent on Margaret's side of the bed was still faintly visible, a shape worn in over decades. I touched it once, gently, and whispered, I kept my promise, Mart. I didn't let them win. Then I locked the front door, not with the original keys. They were now useless, but with the brand new locks I had installed just 2 days earlier. I hired a locksmith who didn't ask questions, just replaced the brass hardware with sleek silver units, and handed me 3 new keys. I kept one, left one at Willow Glen, and buried the third under a loose paving stone near the hydrangeas Margaret had planted. I drove back to Willow Glen just before dusk, phone in hand, eyes flicking occasionally to the app. The house sat quiet on the screen, still and empty, waiting. I had replayed this scene in my mind a dozen times already. I imagined Logan's frown as his key refused to turn, Amber's confusion as the garage opener didn't respond, the shift from casual confidence to panicked realization. Now it was no longer imagination. It was minutes away from becoming real. I knew their routine well. They were methodical travelers, never rushed, always calculating. Logan hated traffic, especially through the airport connector, so he always scheduled midday returns. Amber preferred to unpack the same evening, and they always picked up dinner on the way home. usually Thai food or rotisserie chicken. That meant they would pull into the driveway around 4:30, maybe a little earlier if the flight landed ahead of schedule. I sat down in my reading chair, the apartment around me unusually quiet, my attention fixed entirely on the phone. At exactly 4:27 p.m., the feed flickered with movement. The front bushes trembled as a gust of wind passed through, and then the frame captured Logan's black SUV pulling into the driveway. My heart began to thump, not from fear, but anticipation. The passenger door opened first. Amber stepped out in sunglasses, her posture relaxed, carrying her designer tote like she'd just conquered a minor business empire. She looked fresh from the airport, but smug, as if she already had plans for which room would become her home office. Logan got out from the driver's side, stretching his back and then walking around the SUV to grab their bags from the trunk. I watched him glance toward the porch with the familiarity of someone returning to something he believed belonged to him. They walked up the path together. Logan reached into his pocket and pulled out the key ring, spinning it once around his finger before selecting the house key. He inserted it into the lock and gave it a confident turn. Nothing happened. He tried again, twisting harder, then jiggling it, but the deadbolt held firm. He leaned in closer, examined the lock, and tried a second key, as if maybe he had grabbed the wrong one. Still nothing. Amber stepped forward, frowning. Her voice came through the camera's microphone, sharp and impatient. "What's going on? Is it jammed?" Logan muttered, "No, it's not the key. The lock's been changed." The tone in his voice shifted from mild annoyance to unease. Amber scoffed. "Changed? Why would your dad change the locks without telling us?" Logan tried the knob again, then stepped back and looked around as if answers might appear in the bushes. I watched him look down and finally noticed the envelope. He blinked, pulled it free from the tape, turned it over, and read their names scrawled in my handwriting. Amber peered over his shoulder. "Is that from him?" "It's from my dad," he said flatly, then tore it open. The camera didn't have a close enough view to read the letter, but didn't need to. I had written every word to be unmistakable. I watched their eyes scan the page, and I saw exactly the moment their expressions changed. Amber's jaw tightened. Her face turned blotchy with frustration. Logan's mouth opened slightly, then closed again. He read the letter a second time, like he couldn't believe it the first time had been real. Amber snapped. "He sold the house? Are you serious?" Logan looked like the air had been punched out of him. "It says he sold it. It's gone. Everything's gone." "But," Amber began, her voice pitching higher. "He couldn't. He didn't have the right." "He did," Logan snapped. "It was always in his name. Mom never put me on the deed." "You told me we were inheriting it," she shouted. "You said he was going to give it to us." "That's what I thought," Logan said, his voice cracking. "He always said it would be mine someday." "And what? He just walks away and leaves us with nothing." "He didn't just walk away," Logan growled. "He planned this. The new locks, the letter. He knew exactly what he was doing." I leaned forward, elbows on knees, watching as my son, my only son, began to unravel in real time. Amber was pacing now, her heels tapping angrily on the concrete. "Where is he? Call him. Get him on the phone." He disconnected the landline, Logan muttered, still staring at the letter. "And he doesn't have a cell. Then how are we supposed to find him?" "I don't know." Logan exploded. "I don't even know where he is." Amber threw her hands in the air and stormed off the porch. Logan followed, the letter still in his hand. They stood near the car, arguing loudly now, the camera picking up every word. Amber screamed, "We built our whole financial plan around that house." "You built your plan," Logan spat. "I just went along with it." "Are you blaming me?" she shouted. "You're the one who said he wouldn't make a fuss. You said he was too old to understand what we were doing." "Well, I guess I was wrong," Logan said bitterly. "Looks like the old man was 2 steps ahead of us." They stood in silence for a moment, Then Amber muttered, "What are we going to do now?" Logan didn't answer. He crumpled the letter in his fist, stared up at the house, and shook his head. "I don't know." I watched them walk slowly back to the SUV, no longer full of that confident energy they arrived with. They loaded their bags in silence, climbed into the front seats, and just sat there, unmoving. I turned off the live feed and placed the phone face down on the table. Not the quiet, lonely kind that fills the empty house of a widower, but the kind that comes after a storm when the wind finally dies down and everything you feared has already passed. I poured myself a glass of water and stared out the window, knowing Logan and Amber were probably still sitting in their SUV, digesting the truth that their plan had collapsed. They had treated me like a roadblock to be removed, a pawn to be maneuvered, a burden to be hidden away. But now they were the ones left outside, keys in hand, future in shambles, staring at a house that no longer belonged to them. An hour later, I checked the feed again. The car was gone. I imagined them driving aimlessly, arguing, trying to figure out what had gone wrong and how I had outplayed them. But what they didn't understand, what they never had the humility to learn, was that age doesn't mean weakness. It means experience. And I'd had a lifetime of it. The next morning, I woke up early and made a quiet breakfast, toast, and black coffee, the same way I always had. The sun filtered in through the blinds, casting soft stripes across the table. I sat and flipped through the local paper out of habit, though I barely read a word. My mind was still in the old house, standing in the front room, watching Logan read my letter. I imagined the disbelief on his face, the twist in Amber's mouth when her careful schemes crumbled. Around 9:30, my phone buzzed. It was a number I didn't recognize, but I didn't need caller ID to guess who it was. I let it ring. A minute later, a voicemail notification appeared. Then another. Then a text. Then another number called. Amber's, no doubt. I ignored them all. I wasn't interested in conversations. There was nothing left to explain. I turned off the ringer, placed the phone on the shelf beside Margaret's photo, and went for a walk. Willow Glen had a small path that looped around the back of the property, lined with pine trees and benches where older residents sat with dogs or books or just their thoughts. I passed a woman named Helen who waved kindly. I nodded back and kept walking, feeling the morning air settle into my lungs like a tonic. I hadn't felt this in control in years. When I returned to my apartment, I turned the phone back on. 10 missed calls, 6 voicemails, 4 texts, all variations of the same theme. "Please call me back. We need to talk. What happened?" "This isn't fair." I didn't respond. They weren't asking because they cared about me. They were asking because they were scared. And that was new for them. They'd always assumed they held the power. But now the script had flipped. That evening, I sat by the window again and poured a small glass of bourbon, Margaret's favorite for celebrations. The bottle had been unopened since her passing. I had kept it in a cabinet as a memory, but tonight felt like a moment worth honoring. I toasted quietly to the woman who had warned me not to give so much that Logan forgot to be grateful. She had seen this long before I did. The next day, the final twist arrived. I had arranged for the movers to send Logan and Amber's remaining belongings, boxes of clothes, electronics, personal items, directly to a storage unit I had rented under their names. I sent the address to Logan's email with a note that read, 30 days to claim. Then it's out of my hands. Within an hour, I received an email reply. It was short, defensive, full of wounded pride. "I can't believe you did this. After everything we've done for you." I laughed out loud at the screen. Everything they had done for me. They meant the bare minimum visits, the polite phone calls, the time they moved in without paying a cent, ate my food, used my utilities, and left without once saying thank you. That wasn't generosity. That was exploitation. And now, they were seeing it clearly because I had finally stepped away from the role of the obedient old man. 2 days later, the voicemails shifted from angry to desperate. Logan's voice cracked as he asked where I was, begged me to reconsider, told me they were just looking out for me. Amber left a long message blaming him entirely, saying she had never agreed to force me out, that it had all been a misunderstanding. I deleted it all. I had no room in my life for revisionist history. On the 5th day after the letter, I received a call from the realtor Travis. The new owners had officially taken possession of the house. Keys were transferred. Payment was completed. The title was clean. It was done. I thanked him, hung up, and looked around the small apartment that had slowly become familiar. The floors didn't creak like the old house. The walls didn't echo with 30 years of memories. But it was quiet, peaceful, and best of all, it was mine. Later that afternoon, I visited the bank to finalize the transfer of the sale money into a new account I'd opened. The clerk called me Mr. McKinney and offered me coffee while we waited for the confirmation. I declined the drink, but accepted the respect. As I signed the last form, I felt the final thread snap loose from the past. I had watched the pain of realization flicker across their faces, seen their arrogance collapse on the porch of a house they thought was theirs, and heard their desperate voicemails begging for a chance to explain. Now it was time to speak. One final message, not of anger, but of truth. I wasn't interested in revenge. What I wanted was for them to understand deeply and fully what they had done. Not just to me, but to themselves. They had believed they were playing a clever game, steering an old man toward a comfortable exit so they could inherit a life they never earned. But they had miscalculated the most basic truth. A man who builds a home with his own two hands doesn't just give it away. A man who carries a lifetime of sacrifice doesn't forget the weight. And a father who has been silent too long eventually finds his voice. I began the letter slowly. Dear Logan and Amber, I wrote, you may think I've been cruel, that I've abandoned you, or that I've overreacted to a simple conversation you didn't mean for me to hear. But let me assure you, what I heard was not simple, and it was not a mistake. It was the clearest insight into how you view me, an obstacle, a liability, a relic in the way of your future. You didn't see me as a father, or as the man who gave you everything I had, but as a piece of property to be managed. So I made a decision, not out of spite, but out of necessity. The words flowed more easily than I expected. I told them how I had sold the house not to punish them, but to reclaim something they had slowly taken from me over the years, my dignity. I wrote about Margaret, about how hard she worked to make that house a home, and how deeply it would have wounded her to hear what they said about me. I reminded them that she was the one who had warned me to set boundaries, to not give away so much that I forgot to keep a little for myself. I told them I hadn't forgotten. I had just waited too long to act. I explained the new apartment, the fresh start, the quiet peace that came with finally being free of obligations disguised as family loyalty. And then I gave them what they needed most. Not money, not forgiveness, but a mirror. The house is gone, I wrote. The inheritance you counted on is no longer guaranteed. But what you truly lost has nothing to do with bricks and wood. You lost my trust. You lost the chance to show me you valued me as more than a transaction. That is the real cost. I finished the letter with a short paragraph. I am not cutting you off completely. But from now on, you will earn what you receive, not assume it. If you want to be part of my life again, you will have to show me, not through apologies or explanations, but through action. Until then, I will not respond to further messages. Take this time to reflect. I hope one day you will come to understand. I folded the letter, placed it in an envelope, and addressed it in the same careful handwriting I had used for their wedding gift 10 years earlier. I walked it to the mailbox just outside Willow Glen's main office, slid it in, and watched the flag rise. It was done. The message was sent. That evening, I sat outside on the bench beneath the pine trees behind the building, the same bench I had passed during my first walk here. A light breeze stirred the air, and the sun dipped low behind the hills. An elderly couple walked by, hand in hand, chatting softly about dinner plans. I smiled, not at them, but at the thought that I still had time to live for myself, to remember who I was before I gave everything away, to rebuild not just a routine, but a reason. The next day, I turned my phone back on briefly and saw no new calls. I imagined the letter had arrived, and silence was their first response. That was fine. Silence can speak volumes. A week passed, then two. One afternoon, I received a small envelope in the mail with no return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper in Logan's handwriting. It said, "I understand. I'm sorry. I'll do better." No excuses, no defenses, just those words. I placed the letter beside Margaret's photo, just under her favorite bookmark from the novel she never finished. I didn't call back. Not yet. Change doesn't come in a single sentence. It comes in choices, in time, in proof. But it was a beginning, and that mattered. That weekend, I volunteered at the local library, something Margaret had always wanted us to do together when we retired. I sorted books, helped a young boy find a copy of a Hardy Boys mystery, and chatted with the librarian about local events. No one there knew who I was or what had happened. I liked it that way. I was just Harold, the new volunteer, a man with a steady hand and a quiet smile. 3 months passed like the pages of a worn book gently turned in a quiet room. Each day folded into the next with a rhythm I had not known in years. My life in the small apartment at Willow Glen had taken on a new shape, not as a holding cell for the forgotten, but as a sanctuary reclaimed by choice. I had joined a local woodworking class run by a retired Marine named Pete, who'd lost 2 fingers but not an ounce of wit. Every Thursday, we sanded down memories into furniture for the community center, laughing over shared backaches and black coffee too strong for polite society. On Saturdays, I helped Helen, the woman who had first waved at me on the walking path, run a garden club in the courtyard where tomatoes now ripened under the Idaho sun. I was no longer just Margaret's widower or Logan's father or some old man everyone assumed would quietly fade. I was Harold again. And then one Friday morning, just as I returned from picking up a used record player I found at church sale, there came a knock at my door. Not hurried or hesitant, just a firm, respectful knock. I set the record player down and opened the door to find Logan standing there alone. He wore a simple blue shirt, the kind Margaret used to buy him when he didn't care what he wore, and his face looked different. Not sad, not ashamed, but stripped of all the defenses I had grown used to seeing. "Hi, Dad," he said. I said nothing at first, only stepped aside and gestured for him to come in. He did so quietly, his eyes scanning the room, taking in the modest furniture, the photo of Margaret still on the shelf, the smell of tomato soup simmering on the stove. "It smells like home," he said softly. "I didn't know where else to go today." "You found the right place," I said, and motioned to the table. We sat across from each other like 2 men who once shared everything, but had forgotten how to speak plainly. The silence stretched, not awkward, but sacred. Then Logan pulled something from his coat pocket, a folded piece of paper. "I've been carrying this with me for weeks," he said. "I've written it and rewritten it 10 times. But I realized no version of it was good enough. So I stopped editing." He placed it on the table, but didn't slide it toward me. "It's not an apology letter. It's not a justification. It's just what I saw finally, what I didn't want to admit. I didn't reach for the letter. Not yet. I looked at my son, the boy I raised, the man I once feared had vanished under greed, and saw him clearly. Not a villain, not a victim, just human. I didn't expect you to understand," I said, "only to feel the weight of it." "I did," he said. "When I saw that letter on the door, I was furious. But underneath it, there was something else. Embarrassment. Not because you caught us, but because I knew you were right. He took a shaky breath. Amber's gone. We separated last month. She wanted the house more than she wanted the truth. I didn't realize how far we had both gone until you made it stop. That part stung more than I thought it would. I had never liked Amber, but I had hoped that maybe she brought Logan something I never could: connection, family, partnership. But what she brought instead was corrosion disguised as ambition. I never stopped loving you, Dad, Logan said suddenly. But I stopped respecting you, and I don't even know when that happened. Maybe when Mom died. Maybe before. I took your silence for weakness, your kindness for surrender. I treated you like a stepping stone, not a foundation. My throat tightened, but I didn't speak. I didn't need to. He continued. When you cut us off, I thought you'd lost it. But the truth is, that was the first time you truly stood up. And the crazy thing is, the moment you stopped trying to hold us together is the moment I started figuring out who I was. That's the cruel thing about family, I finally said. Sometimes we don't realize who's carrying everything until they set it down. We sat a while longer. I finally picked up the letter and unfolded it, skimming the words but not needing to read them. The fact that he wrote it, that he brought it and laid it on the table between us, was the message. I asked if he wanted to stay for lunch. He said yes. I ladled soup into bowls and sliced the sourdough bread I had made the night before. We ate slowly, talking not about the past or the house or what had been broken, but about simple things. The garden, Pete's terrible jokes, Logan's new apartment. It was a conversation like a bridge rebuilt plank by plank, not hurried, not perfect, but stable. After he left, I stood at the window and watched him walk to his car, not with the arrogance he once carried, but with something quieter, maybe humility, maybe gratitude. And I realized that this was the ending Margaret would have wanted. Not revenge, not estrangement, but clarity, growth, redemption. I didn't get my house back, but I got something better. I got to become whole again. And in doing so, I gave Logan the chance to begin again too. That night, as I sat on the bench outside with a slice of pie and the soft sound of jazz playing through the record player, I thought about all that had changed. Not just the address or the furniture or the locks, but the boundaries I had drawn, the voice I had found, and the peace I had earned. Peace, I had learned, isn't something you inherit. It isn't something your children can give you or your spouse can leave behind. Peace is something you choose, something you fight for, something you protect, even when it means walking away from everything you once thought you needed. I chose peace. And finally, I had it. The end. If this story moved something in you, if it reminded you of the quiet strength we sometimes forget we have, go ahead and like the video. Subscribe if you want more stories that hit close to the heart. And I'd really like to know, what part hit you the hardest? Were you watching this from home, during a break, or maybe while out for a walk? Drop a comment and tell me where in the world you're listening from and what you'd have done in my shoes. Let's talk about it, because sometimes all it takes is one honest moment to change everything.